Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am with Brit Richards, the winemaker of Head High Wines in Carneros. Brit, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us a little bit about Head High.
So Head High is a brand that I started working with in 2018, and we primarily work with Pinot and Chardonnay, and we're slowly branching into a couple other things. But our main idea is Pinot for the people. We really wanted to bring high quality wines at a lower price point, and so that was a huge driver for us, and bring quality at that price point. And so that's kind of what we're doing. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And so do you own any vineyards? Are you sourcing all your fruit, a combination?
We're sourcing most of it. We're part of the Price family group, and so the Price family obviously owns vineyards, but for the most part for Head High, we are sourcing all of our fruit. So,
from any particular regions?
All over Sonoma County.
Okay.
We stick to Sonoma County, and that gives us a large enough bubble to source out of. We're sourcing different vineyards every year, and so we didn't want to kind of constrict ourselves to a smaller pool, and so it allows us a little bit more freedom.
And what's your total case production?
We do about 13,000 cases right now, and we're growing. So I think we're set to do 13 this year, and then we're trying to bump up even more next year. So
Pinot for the people. And your wines are available across the country or in specific markets?
We're available across the country in most wholesale channels. So
people can find it because it's Pinot for the people.
Exactly. That's the idea.
So what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Oh, man. I grew up raised Catholic, and so mine was actually in church. So, I mean, I remember going and, drinking wine and being like the only kid who was interested in that. But yeah, I mean, I'd say that that's really my first memory. But as far as winemaking goes, I grew up and knew this family, and the woman who owned the winery was a winemaker, proprietor, and I just thought she was the coolest person, and it really is what got me into wanting to be involved in wine. So I had never considered doing anything else, to be honest.
That's kind of cool because so many people don't know it's an option in what they can do, and you had a role model at a young age.
Yeah, I was always a kid who was really active, but also really loved science, and I was never able to kind of sit still. And so I knew I needed a career that involved moving around and sort of being able to be outside as well, but also included sciences. And so just seeing her, the idea of doing that. And I had always really loved food and beverages and all of those things. And so I did one internship in high school where I thought for a small stint I would be a pediatric dentist, and I hated every minute of it, mainly because you were just confined to a small space indoors. And I knew that's what I had to do was winemaking. So yeah.
Well, so obviously you've moved way past the communal church wine, but I'm curious if there is a wine that stands out as one of those aha moments for a myriad of reasons, whether it was the taste of the wine or maybe what it said about wine, or maybe it was just the occasion. But is there a wine that comes to mind?
Yeah. So not any one in particular, but I, in college, was a wine steward at a restaurant. And I remember my major aha moment because I hadn't really liked Chardonnay prior to that. It wasn't just one that I was all that interested, but I had the Peter Michael Chardonnays, and I was kind of blown away. And it was sort of my aha moment of like really where my interest kind of lied. And like I went on to work at Peter Michael specifically because I was like, I need to know the ways of the gods who got me there. So I mean, it is really, I always think it's kind of one of those, I really love making Chardonnay, and I really love turning people onto Chardonnay, because for me that's exactly what happened to me is I wasn't a Chardonnay lover, and then it is my favorite thing to drink now. So,
and it just took that one wine, that aha moment. So if we were to come to your home, what kind of wines would we find in your cellar? I mean, you're a winemaker, and you mentioned that your husband's a winemaker. Is it all wines that you guys make, or wines from around the world, or certain grapes?
Obviously, we have everything that we make, but I would say we both have a really bad habit of buying sparkling wine only. And I would say that there is like many other people who would say the same. And we're definitely white wine drinkers in our house. Maybe because we make so much red wine, it's kind of refreshing, but definitely anything that sparkles will be in our house. So.
And is there anything that you opened up recently that you drank that you enjoyed very much?
Oh, that is a great question. I am not going to be able to pull something to mind of recent. But I would say, I mean, obviously it was a champagne, and I can't remember exactly which one it was because I wasn't the one who opened it. But, those always impress me. I mean, they're just the way they age and the way they evolve is always interesting to me. So, yeah.
So when it comes to wine grapes and being such a fan of Chardonnay now that you know it so well, but also working with Pinot Noir, would you say that either of those are a perfect variety, or do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No, absolutely not. I mean, they all are finicky in one way or another. And I think it's just really understanding the finickiness of each individual grape and like what they can handle and what they can't. I always find that like relating grapes to people and not genders necessarily, but just like, but relating them to people and circumstances is always really helpful for people to understand rather than just like a varietal concept. So like when people are trying to understand Pinot, for example, I'm like, Pinot is like a man who gets sick, like they just kind of like go crawl in bed and they can't handle it. And always like Chardonnay is like when it hits heat, it can handle it, it hacks its way through, and then it comes out on the other side. So, I mean, people can relate and understand to a lot more of that than they can to like the actual science behind why each individual grape is functionally able to handle one thing or another better suited. Obviously, I think that the geography of where it's planted has a big impact, what rootstock it's on. And I just think that they all have their different nuances. So I don't know that there is necessarily a perfect grape, and it's also what you do with it. So
absolutely. Well, so on that with you were saying that describing a grape and kind of what it's like, it's an interesting way for someone to understand it. So what's your opinion on wine critics and scores? Are they useful in people understanding? How do you sort of look at those?
I think it depends on what you're looking at. I think that like wine critics in general, for some people are really useful and they help, give descriptors and like what wines you should be trying. But obviously coming from a background of like wanting people to understand wine or understand it at a more basic level, I always feel like you have to have some more human element to it for people to understand, because I mean, I come from a family that isn't involved in wine or doesn't know a lot about wine, and I meet so many people out there, and I think sometimes they're overwhelmed by the information they get rather than feeling like it is approachable. And so when people always say, give me a descriptor, I'm like, you tell me a descriptor. Tell me what you think about it. Is it something that's pleasing to you? And everybody's palate's different. Everybody's tolerance of bitterness is different. Everybody's tolerance of tannin is different, or histamine. And so I think that it's really a person to person dependent. And I think that it's great to get like a really broad stroke from like a critic and say, okay, so this is pretty good in this range, but it's also good understanding what those numbers come from, and understanding that like at a higher price point, you should be getting some of those higher scores, obviously, but there, what's a price point where, what is the score that is considered good for that?
Right.
So, so I think that some people just don't really understand that. So while it's sort of helpful, I think that sometimes just having more of a human element to the wines are better.
Well, so on that note of like a human element and tasting wines and describing what you like, obviously one of the things that we love to do is pair food and wine. That's obviously something that people aspire to do good pairings. Do you have any rules that you follow, any tips, or do you really just say, try it? If it works, it works. It doesn't, it doesn't.
I'm sort of a try it person. And if you like it, that's what matters. And so, I mean, personally, being a white wine drinker, and in life, I opt for things I really like high acids. That's not to say that things that I make are necessarily high acid, but just in food. And so I always say okay, so you can usually have sort of a higher pH wine with something that has a lot of acid because they sort of balance each other out. But I think that that's anything in life, right? Is you're just trying to find balance between what you're eating and what you're drinking. But if it's something that you like and nothing is overpowering the other, then, have at it. Nothing should stop you.
So for someone who hasn't had the pleasure to taste your wines yet, how would you describe them? What are they missing out on?
So I think of wine as very approachable, and I also think that they're much more fruit forward. I kind of seek out making wines that are very indicative of kind of the grape itself. I'm not trying to overpower it by anything particularly. I don't go heavy on oak. I don't try and make it, super acidic or, super high pH. I'm sort of right in the middle, and I want people to get an idea. And I think this is the idea behind people understanding our concept is what a grape particularly tastes like. If I have too much oak in something, you're going to be tasting the oak. You're not going to be tasting Pinot, Right. And same with Chardonnay. I took an approach with the Chardonnay. Chardonnay in particular was fermenting. I always really liked it during fermentation, and there was a point in that fermentation where I thought, man, if everybody could just taste Chardonnay right here and you could bottle it, everybody would just love it. And that's kind of where I took our Chardonnay. There's no ML, there's no oak. It's really kind of it's not naked, but it's still full bodied, and there's still a lot of aromatics in there that aren't coming from oak or ML. And so that's sort of where I wanted people to taste wine.
Because it's the grape expressing itself.
Right.
So how many different wines do you make?
So for Head High, I make 6 now.
Okay.
So we're kind of veering off and making smaller quantities of some other things that we're trying out, and those will be available more in the fall. But right now we just have the Pinot, the Chardonnay, and a Zinfandel out there.
3 wines.
3, yeah.
And if space aliens were to land on your property, which of those wines would you want to say, welcome to Head High?
I'd do the Chardonnay, of course.
So, you're sourcing from all over the valley and from different vineyards. And how much time are you spending in the vineyards?
A lot. I mean, a lot of what we are doing, because we are getting different vineyards every year, it's an Iron Chef process. So some of these I only see 1 year at a time, and so it's really important once I know where we're sourcing some of this fruit to spend as much time in there to understand its evolution, because that's maybe the only time I've got. I don't have past history of what's going on in there, and so I tend to, especially leading up to picking, kind of really try and eyeball it out and taste a lot of what's out there.
Spend a little time talking to the vines.
Yeah, I let them sing to me a little bit. Yeah, sure.
In the time that you've been making wine and spending and living in this area, I mean, we know every vintage tells a different story, and obviously the last 5 or so years have given us some pretty extreme elements. But in general, do you see big variations from vintage to vintage, or more commonality in a region like this?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say that for me, because I am sourcing kind of all over and differently every year, it is different. I'm trying to make a pretty consistent product year to year, and so a lot of that is trying to take the parts out of it that are going to change that and try and keep some consistency within my own winemaking practices. And so while there is some and so while there is some things I have to like veer off of, I try and make a consistent product. I view wine, at least for Head High, I view this a lot like a puzzle. And so I need to be building like a ton of different puzzle pieces to be able to see what the puzzle picture is creating. And so year to year, those puzzle pieces might be different, but I'm trying to create some consistency within our own portfolio. So yes, obviously there is differences in variation in every vineyard, and that's just agriculture. Right. I mean, that is like, if someone said, no, I don't see any difference, I would be like, what? But I mean, yeah, that's just the nature of our business. And it's actually just more, it's more being able to evolve with it rather than against it. So
are there any sort of signs or predictors that you look for that will give you a sense of what you're going to get in a given vintage or from a particular vineyard?
After the last 5 years, I'm going to say no. I don't think we saw a lot of that coming. So, no, I think you have to just take it day by day. I mean, at least for me, it's like, okay, let me see what's out there. If this happens, what am I going to do? I mean, it's just, I feel like it's a very much rolling with the punches, and I deal really well under stress. And so I think it's being able to, how are you handling things that are thrown at you that kind of dictate what's going to happen next. So
yeah. So have you established any sort of rituals or protocols that you do at the start of harvest to kind of kick it off? One consistent factor?
No. Yeah, Greg, what? No. I feel like it's been different. And sometimes it's you don't know when it's coming is the other side of that. Like, I try and stay calm. I just I'm a keep calm person, and I like to check everything out. And, as long as I can do that, I'm usually, like I said, I'm really good at just, being able to be thrown things and deal with them. So, yeah, I don't know.
Good to take things in stride.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you were little, you've known from a young age that you wanted to be a winemaker, or was there ever, other than your one short moment of wanting to be a pediatric dentist, were there any other desires?
No, actually, weirdly, no. I never considered doing anything else. Wow. So, I mean, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great path that you've been on. So when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
Oh, well, I have 3 kids, so a lot of it is spent with them. And we have an acre that we garden a lot and spend a lot of time on, but just, I love running, so I run and cycle and, love to spend time outdoors, but that's, a lot of it's just spent with family. Yeah. So, yeah.
So on the rare occasion that you're able to take a break and have a romantic evening with your husband and put the 3 kids to sleep, maybe you don't remember these, but what sort of wines would the two of you open that set a romantic mood for you and not just an average night?
No, this is a good one. He would laugh if he was listening to this right now, because I'm pretty sure most of the time it's putting ourselves to bed at 8 o'clock with a cup of tea. But I would say that, usually it involves sparkling wine, and, just a glass of it is nice. And honestly, most of it's just being quiet. I would say that the last time we had a date night, and he would kill me for telling everybody this, but we moved a bathtub outside, and we were able to take a bath outside with some champagne, and it was lovely just looking at the stars and just having a nice night. So
that sounds like a perfect romantic evening.
Yeah.
So when you think about what you've accomplished in your career,
sure,
what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
I'm going to say the Head High wines, just because, so after having worked in a lot of high-end environments and making a lot of expensive wine, I realized making expensive wine in some facets is really easy, and the challenge is making a really, really good wine at a lower price point. There's many more restrictions that you have, and coming from a household who could not afford the wines I used to make, and making wines now that my family can afford, or my friends could afford, to me is is the biggest accomplishment, you know. And I had another winemaker say to me the other day, the proudest wines he made were the ones were the cheapest. And I could relate to that, because there's something about it when you're really passionate about it that, you know, you've accomplished this thing that you came out to do, where, you know, more people it could be visible for more people. So, you know,
I love that. You know, for the people.
Yeah.
So when you look back at your career, or maybe it wasn't part of your career, but is there a piece of advice that somebody gave you along the way that you carry with you, that is part of how you live or how you think or your work ethic or your life ethic?
I don't know that it is anything that anyone has said to me, but probably more how I've ethically lived. I always really wanted to be a mom and be like present as a parent, but I also am a really hard worker, and I really like working, and I love my job and what I do. And a lot of when I became a parent, I sort of had I'm going to ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission, and it was being able to show my kids what I do, and so they've always sort of tagged along. As you can see, they're here now with me.
We have two of the three sitting here quietly listening to Mom.
Yeah, and so they get to see what I do, and I know that, like, growing up, my dad brought me along to work, and it actually stamped. I don't think about it as much, but I did think about it the other day about how much like of a work ethic I got from seeing him work, and also just, you know, understanding what they do all day. I mean, as kids we forget, but like they don't really understand. So them getting to see like why you're doing what you do and seeing that you're passionate about it is really important to me. And so I would say that for me, that is like my biggest advice, is like involving. I mean, it's not for everybody, I'll be honest. I know that plenty of people aren't interested in that, but I would say that for me, it was like a big driver, is, you know, getting to share my existence with them. So
I love that. Well, speaking of sharing wine or sharing an existence, imagine sitting at a table with an empty seat next to you, and your wines are on the table. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to share a bottle of Head High wines with?
Oh my God, that is such a tricky question. I have no idea. I don't know. Are we talking about like important? I don't know. This is a great...
It could be personal, it could be famous, it could be weird, it could be iconic, it could be whatever comes to mind.
Okay, I'm going to say my grandfather Bob, because I never got to meet him, but I heard... So my mom always talks about him, and also, you know, always says she would have loved to have him seen what I do and like met us. And I always think about that, because it's like somebody that would have been important to me, like somebody celebrity wise. I don't care about that, but like, you know, like, yeah.
See, you came up with someone. I like that. No, sharing it and showing family. That's amazing. So I want you to complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like
prison.
Oh God, help us. Okay, so I have you're doing really well. You've been great answers, but I got a couple more like tricky ones.
Okay.
These are like tricky, fun little ones. If you were sent to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you want to take with you?
Oh, that is so tricky. Varietals, you mean?
I don't know. You can go specific.
Okay, because I was going to say I would love to just take some Gewurz. Probably some, I don't know, Chardonnay and some sparkling. Like, we're going to go all whites here.
Gewurz. Interesting. Yeah. Any particular regions or producers come to mind for any of those wines?
You know what? Germany, yeah. I just want something refreshing. If I'm stuck somewhere, yeah.
I like that. And then, we I want to talk about your wines, but I want to play a fun little game as we talk about your wines, and that's pairing wine with music. I mean, it is called Wine Soundtrack afterwards. So the idea with this is that wine conjures up emotions and music makes us feel certain ways. So based on the 3 wines that you make, if you can tell me a genre, a producer, a song, an album, whatever comes to mind. But let's start with your beloved Chardonnay.
Oh, I'm going to say like a French music for Chardonnay. Just like feel good is for sure. Yeah.
And then your Pinot Noir, your Pinot for the people.
Oh, I'm going to go with Texas, the country music. Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then you said you do Zinfandel, right?
Yes, we do. So Zinfandel, let's see. Oh, that one's trickier. That's a great question. I'm going to throw it back to country music again. I would say that, yeah, we like to keep it easy around here.
Accessible wine, accessible music. There you go.
Everybody loves country music. If anyone said they didn't, I would be surprised.
Well, Brit, I know that time is very short for you because you've got 2 anxious little ones that are patiently waiting for you. And it's been really fun chatting with you. But I have one final question for you. And that is, if you could travel, when you can travel again, when you don't have little ones, or maybe you'll take them, but what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list?
Portugal. Yes.
And then this last part of that question is, if people want to taste your wines, can they visit you here in Sonoma? Where can they find your wines? How can they find Head High?
So if you can email info@headhighwines.com. And you can taste with me, or we have other people who are pouring at our offices, but we are also happy to take you out in the vineyards too.
So it's all by appointment only, and not something people can just walk in. They plan ahead.
Correct. Yes. But you will get somebody real. We are a very small team, so you'll get one of us, so to speak. So
that's great. So if you're heading into Sonoma and you want to taste Head High wines and wines for the people, Pinot for the people, affordable, delicious wines, and meet Brit, come check out Head High Wines. And Brit, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack, and I hope you had fun.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.